stars stretched endlessly across the viewing screen of the Critian warship. Commander Vexthor stood with his forearms crossed, watching the small blue planet that his sensors had detected. Earth, the locals called it. Another primitive world, another species to bring into the Empire's fold. He had done this 1,000 times before. "Bring us closer," Vexthor commanded. His voice echoed through the bridge and his crew moved quickly to obey. The Critians were giants among the galaxy species. They had conquered worlds without number and no one had ever stood against them successfully. This would be no different. But as they approached Earth's moon, something unexpected happened. A human ship appeared on their sensors. It was small, perhaps a tenth the size of the Critian vessel. Vexthor almost laughed. The humans had noticed them and sent a single ship to investigate. How adorable. The human ship moved closer and a communication channel opened. A face appeared on the screen, a human male with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. He wore a simple uniform with insignia that suggested military rank. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Defiant. Welcome to our system. We mean you no harm and hope to establish peaceful contact." Vexthor studied the human. The creature looked soft, weak. It had only 2 arms, no natural armor, no claws or fangs. How had such a fragile species even survived long enough to reach space? "I am Commander Vexthor of the Critian Empire. Your world now falls under our protection. Surrender your vessel and prepare for integration protocols." Captain Morrison's expression didn't change. He tilted his head slightly as if considering the words. "I appreciate the offer, but we'll have to decline. Earth isn't interested in being protected by anyone. However, we'd be happy to discuss a mutual alliance." Vexthor's 4 eyes narrowed. The human didn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation. "You misunderstand your position, human. This is not a request. And this is not a surrender," Morrison replied simply. The audacity shocked Vexthor. In all his years, no species had refused so directly, so calmly. He decided to teach these humans a lesson about the galaxy's natural order. "Fire a warning shot. Disable their shields." The Critian weapons officer activated a pulse cannon, designed specifically to overload enemy defensive systems without causing permanent damage. It was a demonstration, nothing more. The bright blue energy beam shot across space and struck the Defiant directly. For a moment, Vexthor expected to see the human ship go dark, helpless. Instead, something impossible happened. The ship's shields flickered, absorbed the energy, and then suddenly flared brighter than before. On the screen, Captain Morrison had turned to someone off camera. "Amy, what just happened?" A woman's voice responded, filled with excitement rather than fear. "Their weapon pulse is actually pretty interesting, Captain. It's designed to overload power systems, but I managed to redirect it into our shield capacitors. We just got a free recharge." Morrison turned back to the screen. "Commander Vexthor, that was an interesting greeting. Would you like to try again, or should we move on to more productive conversations?" Vexthor felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. His weapons officer looked at him, confusion clear in his expression. "Commander, how did they do that?" "I don't know," Vexthor admitted. "Fire again. Full power this time." The weapons officer hesitated. "Commander, full power could destroy their ship." "Do it." The second blast was 3 times more powerful. It should have vaporized the small human vessel. Instead, the Defiant's shields captured the energy, and then something even more impossible occurred. The energy reversed, bouncing back toward the Critian ship with twice the force. Alarms screamed across the Critian bridge. Vexthor's ship rocked violently as its own attack struck home. Systems overloaded, lights flickered, and crew members scrambled to contain the damage. "Shield generators at 40%. Someone shouted. "Hull breach on deck 7. Weapons offline." Vexthor stared at the screen in disbelief. The human ship floated there, completely undamaged. Captain Morrison looked concerned now, but not afraid. "Commander, I think we got off on the wrong foot here," Morrison said. "Your weapons are offline, you're venting atmosphere, and my engineer is very curious about your technology. I'd really prefer to end this peacefully. Can we start over?" But Vexthor wasn't listening. His warrior instincts, honed over centuries of combat, screamed a single message: retreat. Whatever these humans were, they were dangerous in a way he didn't understand. "Retreat," he ordered. "Maximum speed now." The Critian ship turned and fled, leaving Earth's system behind. The crew worked in shocked silence, unable to process what had just happened. They had never retreated before. The Empire had never retreated. Behind them, aboard the Defiant, Captain Morrison sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Amy, please tell me you can explain what just happened." Lieutenant Amy Peterson appeared on the bridge, her hands covered in grease and her face flushed with excitement. "Captain, their technology is fascinating. The pulse weapon they used operates on a frequency that's actually compatible with our shield generators. I just had to adjust the harmonic resonance and redirect the energy flow. When they fired the second time, I set up a reflection protocol. Basic physics, really?" "Basic physics," Morrison repeated flatly. "You just turned their own weapon against them with basic physics." "Well, I mean, it was a little more complicated than that, but yeah, essentially." Amy grinned. "Did you see how fast they ran? I was hoping to ask them some questions about their power systems." Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We just had our first contact with an alien species. It didn't go exactly as planned, but everyone performed admirably. Especially Lieutenant Peterson, who apparently just scared off the galaxy's first alien visitors with some creative engineering. Well done, everyone." The crew cheered, but Morrison felt uneasy. The alien commander had looked genuinely terrified at the end. That worried him more than the attack itself. What kind of galaxy were they entering if their defensive actions caused that level of fear? 3 weeks later, Commander Vexthor stood before the Galactic Council, a gathering of representatives from 200 species. The council chamber was enormous, a sphere of floating platforms where each species maintained their own delegation. Vexthor had been summoned to explain his retreat, his failure. "You claim these humans defeated you?" The council speaker, a gaseous being called a Nefkor, asked skeptically. "You, Commander Vexthor, who has conquered 47 worlds?" "I did not say they defeated us," Vexthor replied carefully. "I said they reflected our own weapons back at us. They adapted to our attack in seconds. They turned our strength into our weakness." "Impossible," another council member declared. "No species masters technology that quickly." "I saw it with my own eyes," Vexthor insisted. "These humans are different. They don't fight like we do. They don't think like we do. I recommend extreme caution in any future contact," the council murmured among themselves. Finally, the Nefkor spoke again. "Your recommendation is noted, Commander. However, we believe you simply encountered an unexpected defense system. We will send our own diplomatic teams to properly assess these humans. You are dismissed." Vexthor bowed and left the chamber, but as he walked away, he couldn't shake the memory of the human engineer's voice, excited rather than frightened after being attacked. Most species feared the unknown. These humans seemed to embrace it. The galaxy, Vexthor realized, was about to change, whether anyone was ready for it or not. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within days, every spacefaring civilization had heard about the Critian retreat. The story spread through official channels and informal networks alike. The mighty Critian Empire, undefeated for 3,000 years, had run from a species that barely understood faster than light travel. Most species didn't believe it. The Critians must have made a mistake, they said. Or perhaps Commander Vexthor had simply grown old and cautious. Surely these humans couldn't be as dangerous as the report suggested. Several species decided to find out for themselves. The Zorgath Collective was the first to try. They were masters of psychological warfare, a species that conquered not through weapons but through fear. They infiltrated communication networks, spread paranoia, and turned populations against themselves. They had broken 100 civilizations without firing a single shot. They began their standard approach with Earth. False messages appeared on human networks, news reports about fictional disasters, warnings about imaginary threats, videos designed to trigger primal fears. Within a week, they expected humanity to descend into chaos. Instead, something strange happened. Humans began sharing the fake messages with each other, but not in fear. They were laughing. "Look at this obvious fake news," one human posted. "The editing is terrible." "This alien species needs to learn about human psychology," another wrote. "We literally make horror movies for entertainment." Within 3 days, humans had turned the Zorgath's fear campaign into a joke. They created parodies, made memes, and even started a popular video series analyzing the alien psychological techniques. A human psychologist named Dr. Lisa Grant published a detailed analysis of the Zorgath methods, breaking down their tactics and explaining how to counter them. The Zorgath withdrew in confusion. Their ancient techniques, perfected over millennia, had been defeated not by resistance but by mockery. Worse, the humans had published detailed countermeasures, making those techniques useless against any species now. Dr. Grant even sent a thank you message to the Zorgath, calling their work a fascinating case study in cognitive warfare and inviting them to collaborate on research. The Zorgath didn't respond. Next came the Velon swarm, a hive mind species that conquered through overwhelming numbers. They didn't believe in subtlety. When they wanted a world, they simply sent millions of soldiers until the enemy was buried beneath their forces. They chose a small human mining colony on a barely habitable moon as their test target. The colony had only 50 humans, mostly miners and engineers. The Velon sent 10,000 soldiers. It should have been over in hours. Sergeant Ben Hayes commanded the colony's small security team of 12 Marines. When the Velon attacked, he didn't panic. He had read the reports from Captain Morrison's encounter and from Dr. Grant's analysis. Humans adapted. That's what they did. "All right, people," Ben announced over the colony's communication system. "We've got bugs incoming. Lots of bugs. We can't fight them head-on, so we're not going to try. Engineers, I need you to modify the mining equipment. Scientists, I need to know everything about these aliens in the next 2 hours. Marines, we're going to make these bugs regret choosing our colony." The Velon attacked in waves, expecting quick victory. Instead, they found modified mining lasers that cut through their ranks. They found tunnels that collapsed on command, burying hundreds at a time. They found chemical compounds from the mining operation that disrupted their hive mind communications. Most importantly, they found humans who refused to give up. Every time the Velon adapted to a tactic, the humans changed their approach. After a week, the Velon had lost 3,000 soldiers and gained nothing. After 2 weeks, the humans started capturing Velon specimens alive. After 3 weeks, when human reinforcements finally arrived, they found Sergeant Hayes and his team not just surviving but studying their enemy. They had learned the Velon communication patterns, identified their command structure, and even figured out how to disrupt their hive mind connection. "Took you long enough," Ben greeted the rescue fleet. "We were just getting started. Did you know that Velon soldiers have individual thoughts when separated from the collective? We've been interviewing them. It's fascinating." The Velon retreated and never attempted another attack on human territory. The galaxy took notice. These humans didn't just defend themselves. They turned every attack into a learning opportunity. While military encounters grabbed headlines, something quieter but equally disturbing was happening in diplomatic circles. Ambassador Claire Watson arrived at the Galactic Council to present Earth's petition for membership. The Council expected another eager newcomer, grateful for the chance to join galactic civilization. Instead, they got Claire. She was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened to the Council's standard welcoming speech with polite attention, then raised her hand. "Thank you for that introduction," Claire said. "I have some questions. First, why do only 6 species control 70% of galactic trade routes? Second, why are there no representatives from 30 species listed in your historical records? And third, who decided that council membership requires adopting your economic system?" The council chamber fell silent. No one asked questions like that. No one challenged the established order. Ambassador Watson, the Nefcor council speaker, said carefully, "These are complex matters with historical precedents." "I'm sure they are," Claire replied. "I'd like to see the documentation. Earth believes in informed decisions. We'll need full transparency before agreeing to any treaties." Over the following weeks, Claire became the council's greatest annoyance. She questioned everything. She found inconsistencies in trade agreements. She pointed out species being exploited by the system. She suggested changes that would benefit smaller civilizations at the expense of the powerful. "You're making enemies," another ambassador warned her privately. "Good," Claire replied. "That means I'm doing something right. Earth didn't come to the galaxy to make friends with bullies. We came to find partners." The galaxy's power brokers began to worry. Military force didn't work against humans. Psychological warfare failed, and now their diplomatic and economic structures were being questioned by someone who refused to accept that "this is how we've always done it" was a valid answer. Reports filtered back to Earth about all these encounters. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to commander, read them with growing concern. Humanity had barely stepped onto the galactic stage, and they were already making waves. "We're not trying to cause problems," he said to Amy Peterson over coffee in the Defiance mess hall. "Aren't we, though?" Amy replied thoughtfully. "I mean, not deliberately, but think about it. We survive by adapting, by questioning, by trying new things. We evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Every other species in the galaxy comes from worlds where they were the dominant predator, or they evolved in stable environments. They learned to follow patterns, to respect established power, to accept limits. And we didn't," Jake finished. "We couldn't afford to," Amy said. "If early humans had accepted that saber-toothed cats were the dominant predator, we'd have gone extinct. If we'd accepted that crossing oceans was impossible, we'd have stayed in Africa. We survive by refusing to accept that anything is truly impossible." Jake sipped his coffee and thought about that. The galaxy feared humans not because humanity was stronger, but because they represented something the galaxy had forgotten. The idea that the current order wasn't permanent, that rules could be challenged, that adaptation never stopped. Back at the Galactic Council, Commander Vexthor watched Ambassador Claire destroy another ancient trade agreement with pointed questions and irrefutable logic. He caught her eye across the chamber and she nodded to him with a slight smile. Vexthor nodded back, understanding passing between them. She knew he had been right to retreat. He knew she was doing exactly what humans did best, changing everything simply by refusing to accept the way things were. The galaxy was indeed changing, Vexthor thought, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The Galactic Council faced a problem. Humanity had been part of galactic society for 6 months, and in that short time, they had disrupted military doctrines, psychological warfare techniques, and diplomatic protocols. The major powers demanded action. Something had to be done to put these newcomers in their place. The solution came from ancient tradition. Every new species underwent the trials of ascension, a series of challenges that determined their rank in the galactic hierarchy. The trials hadn't been used in centuries because most species failed spectacularly, accepting their subordinate position. The Council decided to revive this tradition for humanity. "They cannot possibly succeed," the Nefcor speaker declared. "The trials are designed to be impossible for primitive species. This will demonstrate humanity's proper place." Earth received the invitation with mixed reactions. Some wanted to refuse, seeing it as a trap. Others viewed it as an opportunity. Eventually, they decided to send a team. Commander Ryan Brooks led the human delegation. He was a calm man in his 40s with military experience and scientific training. With him came pilot Lucy Chen, a young woman with incredible reflexes and creative thinking. Dr. Kevin Martinez joined them, a biologist and engineer who specialized in adaptive technology. The fourth member was Jake Patterson, a combat specialist who had trained with Sergeant Ben Hayes. When they arrived at the trial world, hundreds of alien species filled the observation galleries. Everyone wanted to see the humans fail. The first trial was simple, physical strength. Each species sent their strongest individual to compete in a series of tests. Lifting, braking, endurance, all raw physical power. Humanity's representative was Jake Patterson, a muscular man by human standards, but tiny compared to most alien species. His opponent was a Gorath named Thunkar, a being that stood 3 meters tall and weighed half a ton of solid muscle. The Gorath had never lost a strength competition. The first test was lifting. Thunkar easily hoisted a weight that would have crushed most species. Jake looked at the same weight and didn't even try. "I can't lift that," he admitted honestly. "You're obviously stronger than me." But strength isn't just about muscles, is it? Before the judges could respond, Jake studied the weight structure, then used a piece of metal debris as a lever. By positioning it correctly and using his full body weight, he managed to lift one end of the weight off the ground. "Physics," Jake explained. "Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum to place it on, and I can move the world." That's what a human named Archimedes said thousands of years ago. The judges conferred. The rules said the weight must be lifted. They didn't specify how. They awarded Jake points for the attempt, though Thunkar won the round. The next test was braking. Competitors had to shatter a block of crystallized titanium using only physical force. Thunkar punched straight through it with one massive fist. Jake examined his own block carefully, running his hands over the surface. He found a microscopic crack, likely from temperature changes during formation. He positioned his hands on either side of the crack and applied steady increasing pressure at just the right angle. The block shattered along the crack line. "Weak points," Jake said. "Everything has them. You just have to find them and apply force where it matters most." By the time the physical trials ended, Jake had scored enough points through clever technique to place second overall. Thunkar had won, but for the first time ever, the Gorath warrior had been challenged by someone a third his size. Thunkar approached Jake afterward, confusion evident in his expression. "You are weak," Thunkar said bluntly. "Yet you competed. How?" "I'm weak compared to you," Jake agreed. "But I'm smart enough to know I don't have to beat you at your own game. I just have to change the game." The second trial tested technological advancement. Each species presented their greatest achievement. The Critians displayed weapons that could crack planets. The Zorgath showed mind control devices. The Velon demonstrated their hive mind communication network. Dr. Kevin Martinez stepped forward for humanity with a simple presentation. He showed a prosthetic arm, controlled entirely by thought, indistinguishable from a biological limb in function. Then he displayed DNA data storage, capable of holding more information in a single gram than all of ancient Earth's libraries combined. "Our greatest achievements aren't weapons," Kevin explained. "They're tools for survival, healing, and adaptation. We focused our technology on preserving life and expanding our capabilities, not on destruction." The judges seemed unsettled by this. One of them, a reptilian species called the Cortax, asked, "But what of military applications? How do you conquer with such technology?" "We don't conquer," Kevin replied. "We explore, we learn, we grow. When we face enemies, we adapt our existing technology. Any tool can become a weapon if needed, but that's not what we designed for." The judges gave humanity middling scores, but the other species in attendance were disturbed. They had spent millennia perfecting ways to kill each other. Humans had spent that time perfecting ways to survive and thrive. The third trial was strategic thinking. Commander Ryan Brooks faced the galaxy's greatest military minds in simulated warfare. The simulations were impossibly complex, with thousands of variables and centuries of tactical doctrine built in. Ryan lost the first simulation badly. His fleet was destroyed within minutes. He lost the second and third as well, each time lasting slightly longer. "Do you yield?" the chief judge asked after the third defeat. "No," Ryan said calmly. "I'm learning. Again." By the fifth simulation, Ryan started winning. By the seventh, his opponents couldn't predict his movements. By the 10th simulation, he was using tactics that the ancient war algorithms couldn't process. "How are you doing this?" his final opponent demanded, a brilliant strategist from the Nephkor species. "You had no training in galactic warfare doctrine." "Exactly," Ryan replied. "I don't know your rules, so I'm not limited by them. Every time I lose, I learn what doesn't work and try something new. You've been using the same strategies for centuries. I've been creating new ones for the past few hours." The judges ended the strategic trials early. They had seen enough. The final trial was pure survival. Each team was dropped on a death world known as Kreshnor, a planet where the environment itself seemed hostile to life. Acidic rain, predatory plants, extreme temperature swings, and wildlife that had evolved to hunt anything that moved. Most species were expected to survive 3 days before evacuation. The human team was given supplies for 1 week and wished luck. The observation satellites activated and the galaxy settled in to watch humanity struggle. For the first day, the team did struggle. They dealt with acid rain by creating shelters from local materials. They avoided the predatory plants by studying their hunting patterns. They protected themselves from temperature swings by building insulated clothing from animal hides. By day 3, they had established a base camp with running water and food storage. By day 10, they had mapped the local ecosystem and identified which plants were edible. By day 20, Lucy had befriended one of the smaller predators by feeding it regularly and showing it was safe to approach the camp. When the evacuation team arrived on day 30, they found the humans had built a semi-permanent structure, cultivated a small garden, and were discussing whether to stay longer to conduct more research. "We were supposed to rescue you," the evacuation team leader said, bewildered. "Rescue?" Dr. Kevin looked confused. "We're fine. Actually, we were hoping to get permission to establish a research outpost here. This planet is fascinating. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity didn't just survive the deathworld, but thrived on it. Commander Vexthor sat in the observation gallery, watching the humans board the evacuation ship with samples of local flora and fauna. Around him, representatives from hundreds of species whispered nervously. "They passed," someone said unnecessarily. "They didn't just pass," Vexthor replied quietly. "They made it look easy. Every trial designed to show their weakness instead demonstrated their strength." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session that night. The humans had scored high enough to claim a position among the elite species, something no newcomer had achieved in recorded history. More disturbing, they had done it not by being the strongest, smartest, or most advanced, but by simply refusing to accept that the trials were impossible. Ambassador Claire sat in the council chambers, watching the debate rage around her. Finally, the Nefcor speaker addressed her directly. "Ambassador Watson, humanity has passed the trials of ascension. According to our laws, this grants you significant status within our community. How does Earth wish to proceed?" Claire stood and smiled. "We'd like to be useful. Give us the problems nobody else can solve. The planet's too hostile to colonize. The technology's too difficult to master. The conflict's too old to resolve. We'll tackle them." "Why would you volunteer for such difficult tasks?" the Nefcor asked. "Because that's what humans do," Claire replied simply. "We see something impossible and we try anyway. Usually we succeed. And when we fail, we learn and try again." The council had no response to that. They had tried to prove humanity's weakness and instead had shown the entire galaxy just how dangerous human determination truly was. 1 year after humanity joined the Galactic Council, the galaxy was changing in ways nobody had predicted. Human traders established new routes that bypassed traditional monopolies, offering better prices and faster service. Human explorers ventured into regions marked as forbidden, returning with resources and knowledge from places other species had abandoned. Human art, music, and story spread across countless worlds, influencing cultures in unexpected ways. But the real disruption came from human curiosity. Commander Sarah Blake, now stationed at a Galactic Council research facility on the edge of known space, was reviewing historical archives when she noticed something strange. References to 17 species that had supposedly gone extinct over the past 5,000 years. The official record said they had died from natural disasters, plagues, or their own wars. Sarah dug deeper. She was supposed to be researching ancient technologies, but the gaps in the historical record bothered her. She enlisted Dr. Kevin Martinez, who had returned from the trials as something of a celebrity, to help analyze the data. What they found was disturbing. The extinct species hadn't died naturally. They had been eliminated, their worlds sterilized, their histories erased, all by order of the Galactic Council's founding members. The reason given in the classified documents was always the same: potentially destabilizing influence. Sarah brought her findings to Ambassador Claire, who brought them to the full council. The revelation caused chaos. Species that had trusted the council for millennia suddenly questioned everything. Smaller civilizations wondered if they would be next if they became too destabilizing. "You shouldn't have looked into this," the Nefcor speaker told Claire privately. "Some truths are better left buried. Buried truths have a way of causing problems when they surface," Claire replied coldly. "Earth believes in transparency. If the council has nothing to hide, then there's no issue with the truth coming out." The political upheaval lasted for months. Several council members resigned. Others faced investigations. The power structure that had existed for 5,000 years began to crack, and humans were the ones who had delivered the first blow simply by asking questions nobody else dared to ask. Meanwhile, Tom Briggs, a human engineer working on a civilian assignment, solved a problem that had plagued the Draxian system for 3 generations. The Draxians had massive energy needs but couldn't find a sustainable power source. Their scientists had tried everything, from fusion to antimatter. But their planet's unique magnetic field disrupted all conventional approaches. Tom arrived, studied the problem for 2 weeks, and suggested something the Draxians had never considered: using the magnetic field itself as the power source. Every Draxian scientist told him it was impossible. The physics didn't work. The mathematics proved it couldn't be done. Tom built a prototype anyway. It worked. How? The lead Draxian scientist demanded, staring at the functioning device that should not exist. Our calculations proved this was impossible. Your calculations assumed certain limits, Tom explained, showing them his work. I didn't know about those limits, so I didn't include them. Turns out they weren't actually limits, just assumptions. You were so sure it couldn't work that you never tried. The story spread quickly. Humans didn't just ignore conventional wisdom. They actively looked for places where conventional wisdom might be wrong. They questioned assumptions that other species treated as absolute truth. And sometimes, often enough to be terrifying, they were right. The galaxy's fear crystallized into something concrete when the Critian Empire made its second attempt at humanity. They had spent a year preparing, studying human tactics, and developing new weapons specifically designed to counter human adaptability. They had learned from their mistakes. The Critians chose a human colony world called New Boston as their target. It was lightly defended with only a small military presence. The Empire sent 500 warships commanded by Vexthor himself. He had requested this assignment specifically. He wanted to prove that humans could be defeated with proper planning. Admiral Kate Foster commanded the human defense fleet. She had only 50 ships, and most were designed for patrol duty, rather than full military engagement. By every conventional calculation, the battle was already lost. "Admiral, we should evacuate the colony," her second officer suggested as the Critian fleet approached. "Negative," Kate replied calmly. "We're not abandoning 200,000 civilians. Besides, who says we're going to lose?" Kate had studied the reports from humanity's first encounter with the Critians. She knew their tactics, their weapons, their psychology. More importantly, she knew that the Critians expected a traditional battle, fleet against fleet. She gave them something else entirely. As the Critian fleet entered orbit, Kate positioned her ships in a seemingly random pattern around the planet. When Vexthor ordered the attack, the human ships didn't engage directly. Instead, they fired on the planet's atmosphere processors, massive facilities that maintained the colony's breathable air. The processors exploded, releasing massive amounts of energy into the atmosphere. The energy interacted with the planet's natural magnetic field, creating a disruption that scrambled sensors across the entire orbital zone. The Critian fleet was suddenly flying blind. "Where are they?" Vexthor demanded as his sensors showed nothing but static. "Unknown, Commander," his tactical officer replied. "The electromagnetic interference is blocking everything." That's when Kate struck. Using pre-programmed coordinates that didn't require sensors, the human ships fired on the Critian fleet from unexpected angles. By the time the Critians realized what was happening, they had lost 30 ships. "Adapt," Vexthor ordered. "Switch to visual targeting. Compensate for the interference," but Kate wasn't done. She had civilian ships, cargo haulers, and passenger transports, broadcasting false signatures that made them look like military vessels on the few sensors that could penetrate the interference. The Critians wasted weapons fire on empty freighters while real military ships attacked from different vectors. Then Kate used the planet's gravity well as a weapon. She calculated precise trajectories that sent disabled Critian ships falling into the paths of active vessels, causing collisions and chaos. By the time Vexthor ordered a retreat, he had lost over 200 ships. Not a single human military vessel had been destroyed, though several were heavily damaged. The colony remained intact. Kate broadcast a message to the retreating fleet. "Commander Vexthor, we mean you no harm. We only wish to defend our homes. Please let's end this peacefully." Vexthor didn't respond. He simply fled, humiliated for the second time by the same species. The battle was broadcast across the galaxy. Every civilization watched as humanity, outnumbered 10 to 1, completely destroyed a Critian assault fleet. The message was clear. Humans could not be defeated through conventional warfare. They didn't fight fair. They used everything available as a weapon. They turned disadvantages into advantages. The fear that had been growing since humanity's arrival now became something close to panic among the galaxy's power brokers. Emergency meetings were called. Military doctrines were rewritten. Several species proposed desperate measures to deal with the human problem. In the Galactic Council chambers, the mood was tense. Ambassador Claire sat calmly in her seat, while representatives from dozens of species shouted accusations and demands. Some called for humanity's expulsion. Others suggested quarantine. A few even whispered about preemptive strikes. "You've disrupted everything," the Cortex representative hissed. "Your species has been here barely more than a year, and you've undermined our military, our economy, our political structure. You're a threat to galactic stability. We're a threat to your power, Claire corrected quietly. Those aren't the same thing. You manipulate events, another species accused. You turn our own strengths against us. We adapt, Claire said. That's all. We see a situation, we analyze it, we find solutions. If that threatens you, perhaps you need to ask why your power depends on others not adapting. Commander Vexthor entered the chamber, uninvited, but unchallenged. He walked to the center of the floor and spoke directly to Claire. I have fought humans twice now, he said. I have lost both times. Not because you are stronger, but because you refuse to accept that victory is impossible. You turn our weapons against us. You use our assumptions as weaknesses. You learn from every encounter and grow stronger. He paused, then turned to address the entire council. I came here to warn you all. We cannot defeat humanity through force. Every attempt will only teach them how to defeat us more easily. If we want to survive, we must either become their enemies and face extinction, or become their partners and face change. The chamber fell silent. The Critian Empire's greatest warrior had just admitted that humanity was unbeatable. What do you suggest? The Nefkor speaker asked quietly. Accept them, Vexthor said. Learn from them. Change with them, because they will not stop growing, adapting, and pushing boundaries. That is what humans are. We can either grow alongside them or be left behind. As Vexthor left the chamber, Claire allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand what humanity truly represented. Not just another species, but a fundamental challenge to the idea that progress had limits, that rules were. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 3 days straight. Representatives from 200 species argued about what to do with humanity. The arguments grew more heated with each passing hour. Some species demanded immediate action, others counseled patience. Fear filled the chamber like a living thing. Ambassador Claire sat quietly through most of it, letting them talk. She knew that words wouldn't change minds that were already made up. They needed something else. On the morning of the 4th day, Claire requested permission to address the council with a special delegation. The Nefkor speaker, exhausted from days of debate, agreed without much thought. Claire returned with 5 other humans. None of them were military personnel or diplomats. Instead, she brought ordinary people from Earth. Grace Miller was a teacher in her 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. Dan Cooper was a farmer, his hands rough from decades of work. Sophie Turner was a young musician carrying a strange stringed instrument. Max Wright was a 10-year-old boy who looked around the massive council chamber with wide eyes. The 5th was an elderly man named Henry Park, who walked with a cane. The council members stared at this unusual group, confused about what Claire was trying to prove. I've listened to your debates, Claire began. You're all afraid of what humanity represents. You're right to be concerned. We are disruptive. We do change things. We don't accept that rules are permanent, or that the powerful should always remain in power. She gestured to her companions. But I think you've misunderstood who humans are. You've only seen our soldiers, scientists, and diplomats. Let me show you something else. Grace stepped forward first. The Cortex representative immediately spoke up. What can a teacher tell us that we don't already know? I can tell you why humans are the way we are, Grace replied gently. I've taught children for 40 years. Every human child is taught from their earliest days to ask why. Why is the sky blue? Why do we have to follow this rule? Why can't we do things differently? We don't teach our children to memorize answers. We teach them to question everything, to think critically, to solve problems in new ways. When a child fails at something, we don't tell them to give up. We ask them what they learned and encourage them to try again differently. That sounds like chaos, a species representative said. It is chaotic, Grace admitted with a smile, but it's also how we grow. Every generation of humans questions what the previous generation built. Sometimes we keep the old ways, sometimes we improve them. Sometimes we tear them down and start over. It's messy and uncomfortable, but it's how we survived. Dan spoke next, his voice rough but steady. I grow food. My father was a farmer, his father before him. But I don't farm the way they did. I use new techniques, new technology. The land I work was once desert, completely barren. 50 years ago, everyone said nothing would ever grow there. Now I feed 10,000 people from that same land. How? Asked a representative from an agricultural species. By not accepting that desert means dead, Dan replied. We brought water from underground sources. We modified soil composition. We bred plants that could handle extreme conditions. It took decades of failure, but we figured it out. That's what humans do. We look at problems and refuse to believe they're permanent. Sophie stepped forward with her instrument. May I play something? The Nefcore speaker looked uncertain but nodded. Sophie began to play, her fingers dancing across the strings. The music was strange to alien ears, complex and emotional. It rose and fell, expressing joy and sorrow, hope and fear, all without words. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Finally, Sophie spoke. Humans process our emotions through art. When we're afraid, we write songs about it. When we're angry, we paint. When we're sad, we tell stories. Music doesn't solve problems, but it helps us handle the stress of solving them. It reminds us that we're not just surviving, we're living. What does this have to do with your species being dangerous? Someone asked. Everything, Sophie said softly. You're afraid because you don't understand how we handle pressure. Most species either fight or flee when threatened. We do something else. We create, we think, we process our emotions, and then we adapt. Art keeps us sane while we're doing impossible things. Then young Max stepped forward. He looked nervous but excited. My teacher says I can ask questions, so I have one. Why are you all so scared of people who just want to be friends? The simple question from a child hit harder than any diplomatic argument. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Your species is unpredictable, the Nefcore speaker said, trying to be gentle with the child. You change things. Change is dangerous, but change can be good too, Max replied. My mom says that when things stay the same too long, they get stale and boring. She says the universe is always changing, so we should change with it. Isn't that better than trying to keep everything the same forever? Finally, Henry Park spoke. He was 97 years old and had seen humanity grow from a single planet species to galactic explorers. His voice was quiet but clear. I was born before we had even basic space travel, he said. I watched us take our first steps to the moon, build our first space stations, discover faster than light travel. I've seen us fail more times than I can count. I've seen disasters, wars, famines, plagues. I've seen humanity at its worst. He paused, leaning on his cane. But I've also seen us at our best. I've seen us overcome diseases that killed millions. I've seen us turn enemies into friends. I've seen us face extinction-level threats and survive through cooperation and innovation. You want to know why humans are dangerous? Because we've been one mistake away from destroying ourselves for our entire history, and we've always chosen to keep trying instead. Why? Asked Commander Vexthor, who had been watching from the gallery. Why not accept your limitations and be content? Because contentment is death, Henry said simply. The moment we stop pushing forward, we start sliding backward. Our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans. We survived by never accepting that anything was impossible. That's coded into our species now. We can't turn it off even if we wanted to. Ambassador Claire stepped forward again. You're all afraid that we'll destroy what you've built. Maybe you're right to worry. But consider this. Your galactic civilization has been stable for 5,000 years. In that same time, how much have you actually grown? How many new technologies have you developed? How many new ideas have emerged? How many species have risen to join the powerful? And how many have stayed exactly where they were? The chamber was silent. Everyone knew the answer. The galaxy had been stagnant for millennia. We don't want to destroy what you've built, Claire continued. We want to help you build something better. Yes, we question authority. Yes, we challenge assumptions. Yes, we make people uncomfortable. But we also solve impossible problems, forge new paths, and refuse to give up on anyone or anything. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. You can try to suppress us, contain us, or destroy us. But every attempt will fail, and you'll teach us how to defeat you in the process, or you can accept us as partners. Work with us, learn from us, and teach us in return. Grow with us, and if we refuse, the Cortex representative asked, then you'll be left behind, Claire said without malice. Not because we'll force you out, but because the universe doesn't stop for anyone. We'll keep exploring, innovating, and growing. Eventually, you'll either have to catch up or fade into irrelevance. The Nefcore speaker was quiet for a long moment, then spoke to the full council. I propose we take a vote. Not on whether to accept humanity, but on whether we're willing to change. Because that's really what this is about. Can we adapt the way humans do? Can we grow beyond what we've been? The vote took hours. Species caucus debated, argued. Finally, they returned to the chamber. The measure passed by a narrow margin. The Galactic Council would be reformed. Smaller species would get more representation. Trade monopolies would be broken up. Historical records would be made fully transparent. And humanity would be given a unique role: problem solvers, explorers, and challengers of the status quo. Several species voted against the measure and left the council in protest. Others accepted it reluctantly, but enough species recognized that change was necessary, even if it was uncomfortable. Commander Vexthor approached Claire after the vote. "You won," he said simply. "We all won," Claire corrected. "This isn't about humans defeating everyone else. It's about all of us moving forward together." "I still fear your species," Vexthor admitted, "but I think I understand now. You're not trying to be dangerous. You're just trying to survive and grow the same as everyone else. You're simply better at it than most." "We've had a lot of practice," Claire said with a slight smile. 6 months later, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Endeavour. He had been promoted again and given command of a joint human-alien expedition to the Galactic Rim, a region that had been marked as too dangerous to explore. His crew was diverse: humans, Crithians, Velshon, Zorgath, and a dozen other species. They had been training together for months, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. As they prepared to jump into the unknown regions, Lieutenant Lucy,